This is the Reluctant Leader podcast, the podcast designed to help you if you've landed a leadership role through no fault of your own and now need to find out what you should be doing. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and have been there and know what it feels like and made all the mistakes. In each episode, I'll be getting to grips with a leadership topic by interviewing an expert in their field. You'll find out why they do what they do and take away some top tips you can use to become a more confident leader. For more content and to keep in touch with how the project is developing, go to www.thereluctantleader.co.uk. If you have any comments about the episode, you'll find me on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter. So let's crack on with the show. Today I'm talking to Fidel Beauhill. Fidel is the founder of the Modern Man Club, a men-only Facebook community and community interest company by the same name that promotes good mental and physical health for men. He is also an NLP master coach, a master hypnotherapist, and master timeline therapy practitioner, and works with clients on a one-to-one basis to increase performance in different areas of life, relationship issues, and helps men going through divorce, bereavement, or a midlife crisis. Hope you enjoy this chat we had about gender energies, and I'll catch you all on the other side. So Fidel, welcome to the Reluctant Leader podcast.
Very happy to be here. Not reluctant at all.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. So we're going to be talking about gender energies, which is a fascinating subject. I've heard you talk about it lots of times when I've seen you in talking at keynote talking in that environment and also online. So we'll get to that in a minute. But before we get stuck into that, I always ask my guests why they do what they do and what was the pivotal moment that took you down this path.
Ooh, that's a question. It's a bit of a story, I guess. So as you knew, Mark, as you knew me in my former guise as Britain's favourite will writer. I was a will writer for 12 years, pretty much. And I set up my own company. I was touching 6 years ago now. I started speaking as a will writer, and I got more and more experienced as a speaker. And the more I did that, the more I found that there was a need for people wanted me to go a bit deeper. So rather than just kind of like turning up and speaking about the practicalities of wills and probate and the things that people should do, people were asking me for stuff that was a bit more insightful and a bit more inspiring from what I'd learned. And I put together a talk called How to Die Happy, which is about all the things I've been blessed to have spoken to thousands and thousands of people during that part of my career about what's really important to them in life. I still do go and speak to people on their deathbeds, literally, taking last minute wills and elderly people and young people and all sorts of people about what's important. So I put together a little list of what I thought was essential for being able to die happy. And I don't know, the more I went around and spoke, people were coming to me as an authority on death. And I felt like I was kind of pigeonholing myself into this kind of caricature of a Dr. Death, which to start off with was quite amusing and it was fun. As you know, I'm an extrovert guy. I enjoyed the role, but it felt detached. It didn't. Don't get me wrong. I totally believed in what I did. Everybody should have a will. It's really, really important, but it didn't hold a lot of truth for me, if you see what I mean. It didn't feel like my calling. Mm-hmm. What then also happened was I ran into financial difficulties with the business about 3.5 years ago. And I started to grow the company too quickly and borrowed some money and I got into some financial difficulties. And I didn't tell anybody about this. I didn't tell my wife because a similar thing had happened to me about 10 years previously in Spain. And I thought, oh no, I've done it again. I'm doing it again. At that point, I was probably the fittest I've ever been, bar now, actually. I'd had my last fight. I'd won a CrossFit competition. I was really fit and healthy, but I had all this underlying stuff going on. And I ended up having a panic attack when I was driving home from an appointment one day, which felt like a heart attack. I got home and the kids called an ambulance and everything else like that. And I ended up in hospital And it was basically sort of speaking to the doctor and doing my own sort of research afterwards. I found that not talking about what was going on had caused a buildup of internal stress, which had physical outcomes for me, which was something I didn't really understand or know about before. I then went and had some hypnotherapy to try and to help myself through the process, and to also try and deal with the mindset issues that I was having that had created those two problems in my businesses. Prior to that, I'd kind of like started getting worried and scared about myself, and had some limiting beliefs and things like that. So I went and had some hypnotherapy, which was a life-changing experience for me. It really opened up the neural pathways between my unconscious and my conscious mind. And once you've done that, as my clients will testify, it's difficult to go back. I mean, you start to really get in touch with who you are and what makes you happy, and more importantly, what isn't making you happy. And I realized how much of that industry I didn't connect with, and it wasn't making me happy, and how much of that work I didn't enjoy anymore. And the fear that I was creating this character and becoming more and more well known, and I was painting myself into this corner talking about a subject that didn't really hold a lot of personal feelings for me. And more people wanting to know more about me, and I think a lot of my story wasn't really compatible with working in that industry, the legal industry. So much of my business came from financial advisors and things like that, and so talking about me sort of not being very good at business and having some troubles and stuff like that wasn't really compatible with the company I was running. I became so intrigued with hypnotherapy that I went and studied it myself, and that was my first qualification, was in hypnotherapy. I discovered NLP, learnt how to do neuro-linguistic programming, which was fascinating. I loved it, and I carried on training right up to master coach level. So that took me a few years to do, and I became a coach sort of after I finished those qualifications, mainly because I went and I did my last talk of how to die happy in front of a crowd in Southampton. And one of the things is about truth, not only the truth you tell people. So I speak to a lot of people on their, towards the end of their lives, it's always a regret. They regret not telling people the truth, like telling them things like how they love them or what they think of them. And also being true to yourself. And I remember interviewing my mum on a Facebook Live once, and I asked her what bit of advice she would give to her grandchildren. And that was what she said. She would find your truth and live that life as soon as possible. And it's the first time I'd ever told anybody that part about my mum saying it. And there was a photograph of her had come up on the screen behind me as well as I was talking. And it was a really emotional, profound moment, one of those light bulb moments. And I was sat on the train on the way back from that talk, and I realized that I was telling other people to do it, but I wasn't doing it myself. I spent a few days. First of all, I asked myself the question, who am I? Which is it's a big question. Don't ask yourself that, and not unless you're prepared to do a whole lot of work. And I, after a day or so of that, I decided to change the question and went to, what do I have to offer the world? And that's how the Modern Man was born, the idea of the Modern Man Club and the Modern Man Coach. It was when I decided to just switch fully over to coaching and setting up my community interest company, the Modern Man Club. And that's my story of how I came to be.
Mm. I've seen obviously that what you've just described and those 3 or 4 years, and I've seen a lot of that happening in you. And obviously, I was there when you first stood up and said, we're all going to die, when you were doing your wills, which is true. We all know that. But it's actually getting the message out there. And I think that the interesting thing is that we all struggle to get our message out there, but sometimes the most simple things really resonate. And when you talk about wills and you just say that statement, it makes people sort of think, well, that's right, and what am I doing about that?
That catchphrase changed the game for me, and it propelled my speaking career and will writing career through the roof. Really, just that one tagline. So yeah, you're right. When you get it right, you get it. It really works.
Yeah. That's just very interesting. And I think most people struggle with that marketing and getting the message across, and we can learn from that. But we're not here to talk about marketing and all that interesting stuff. But today we'll talk about something well, you could say even more interesting is how do we use gender energies at work? And I know you do some relation work as well, but being this a podcast which is for reluctant leaders, leadership focused, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation about how we use those two gender energies in the workplace. So before we, I think that would be a good place to start for you to explain what are the gender energies and how do you see them working individually, and how that works, when we're interacting with others.
Yeah, so kind of like part of my what sort of caused the issues for me as a business leader, with my staff and running that company, was how ingrained or attached it was to my masculinity. So part of the problem was that I'd attached this idea of being the businessman and money and income and everything else like that, and the responsibility of my staff and everything else to my masculinity. And also attached to that was my kind of fear of showing my vulnerability on that and talking to people about how I wasn't doing very well at it. So it was the first sort of insight I got to how not to use your masculinity and how it can cause problems. So basically, we all have a balance of masculine and feminine energy within us. Predominantly, I'm going to use a lot of generalizations in this conversation because it's impossible to do this absolutely correctly, and it is a fairly controversial subject for some people. But generally, you'll find that your predominant energy will sit with your gender. So if you're a man, you will mainly have some masculine energy. That will be your sort of driving core energy. If you're a woman, it will be feminine. And what we've got at the moment is, for our generation, a bit of confusion about, we've kind of disconnected from both of those. The messaging for our generation has been for men to kind of become a little bit more feminine, and for women to become a bit more masculine, especially in the workplace, especially for women, and especially for female leaders. The impact that that's having is we've got a lot of tired women out there that are coming into to work, and they're putting on their masculine suit of armor. They're being very decisive. They're running companies with great skill and dexterity and everything else like that. But what they struggle to do is take that off when they get home, which is having an impact on relationships and things like that. And likewise, it's an interesting dynamic when you've got men in their masculine energy at work and they're confronted by women who are also in their masculine, and it causes quite a bit of conflict from my experience and from what I've seen and from people that I've spoken to and worked with. I think a lot of women are under the impression that they can't be successful at work and in business and still be in their feminine energy, which I think is a big mistake. Probably the most important bit of this conversation, I think, is that element there. Women not being shown or having a full understanding of how to be powerful and in their feminine energy in the workplace and in business. I think they're missing a trick, the ones that don't.
Yeah. So I suppose what we're talking about here is almost a little bit about the stereotypical sort of what a man is and what a woman is. And if we talk about the workplace, and particularly, obviously, because this is a leadership-focused podcast, is when you are in a leadership position, whether you're a man or a woman, what we're saying here is that you are a combination of these two things, and it's actually being aware so that you can actually use them appropriately.
Perfectly put, Mark. Yeah. So awareness is critical. So really, some of the fundamental things about masculine energy is about being decisive. It is about leadership with compassion and with thought. But those are the kind of real powerful sort of masculine energies. And women will need those in business for sure. And there will be many, many times when they will need to be in their masculine energy. Likewise, you've got things like compassion and empathy and caring and those sort of traits which are more feminine, which in the modern workplace, certainly in England, in Britain, there's a real need for those. I mean, that's what our industries are all about now. They're all about communication. They're all about sort of networking and stuff like that. And they, gone are the days where we, it's not the 80s anymore. It's also not the industrial era where we need to be full on sort of masculine men that are out, trumping everybody in business and that isn't so competitive and stuff like that anymore. Actually, what's needed to be successful these days is a much more nurturing and considerate attitude. So both men and women are having to learn to flow between the two energies in order to be a complete leader, I think.
Yeah, and I've just written down a word called the word is diversity, and it's and I've come across people that are working in that sphere. It's encouraging more women into, especially those senior roles. And it can only be because we need a mixture of these energies, because if we don't, then there's something lacking, and it's just not balanced, is it?
Correct. Absolutely correct. And the fact is that we do need diversity. Diversity is a fantastic word. I think one of the things we get confused about with gender in particular, and one of the things that I'm trying to sort of shout about with what we're doing with the Modern Man Club and the Modern Woman Club is we've kind of assigned roles to gender. So, you can be a leader and be a boss and run a big corporation and be in your feminine energy, and you can be at home looking after your family and doing the school run and cooking dinner in your masculine energy. You can do that. So the masculine and feminine isn't about a role, it's about the energy with which you bring to it. And certainly in leadership, right at the top of the tree, you have to be able to kind of do both. And so there is no reason why there should be any imbalance of men and women. There just shouldn't be. Guys at the top really need to know how to get in touch with their feminine energy, and women at the top will have to have been in their masculine energy to have got there in the first place. So, it's interesting. It'd be very, very interesting to watch this unfold as people twig on.
Yes, and that's the reason why we're talking, because it's such an interesting thing, and like you said, it's slightly controversial. Some people will think, we're being some sort of sexist in some way, but it's not about that. It's about actually, it's individually understanding that we can come from a different place, whether we're coming from whichever energy, and that's what's intriguing to me. And you talk about, let's just flip it a little bit to relationships. It's, and I've heard you talk about, men that, have attracted their partner from being from that masculine energy, but then when the relationship develops and later on, what's lost is that masculine energy. They've sort of almost like defaulted to more of the female energy, and that's what's when they lose their spark, which is I think you've sort of hit on something there that's really relevant.
It is, and that's a bit when I start talking about that in to an audience, I get so many women and a few guys come up to me and goes, you just described our relationship. But what tends to happen is guys in their masculine energy will attract women. Women are core attracted to a masculine energy for lots and lots of reasons that we won't go into. But then what happens is, we've got a generation of women who have been brought up to understand what they want and be able to go and get it and to ask for it. And guys naturally, once we enter into a relationship, will want to kind of please and serve the woman in it. But then what happens is, so women then start asking for what they want, and men then try and do it for them. And then they'll lose the ability to be decisive and to lead their sort of family unit and to lead the couple. And certainly if they do it and then they get it wrong and they get chastised, they'll retreat back into their feminine energy and be more sort of pliable and everything else like that. And the woman will have come home from work and still be doing the masculine role within the family as well, which can lead to them being really, really tired and exhausted. And that's common. The women that I do work with, these are the women that I work with on a personal level. I get a lot of women coming up to me afterwards and wanting to understand how to take off that masculine armor when they get home from work and their leadership roles, to be able to step into their feminine energy at home. And if you only need to work with one part of a couple for it to completely change, because it's a polarity. So it's like two opposing things on a magnet. When you put them together, if you get them the wrong way around, they'll push away from each other. But if you get them the right way around, they're attracted. And so if one of you starts acting in that role, if the woman starts acting in her becoming more feminine when she gets home, the man will naturally step into his masculine energy. It just happens. And I've worked with so many clients now on that, and to watch it happen is still quite magical. Actually, it's really cool. In the workplace, though, it's the opposite, and I think I've seen it in the sort of corporate environments where women in their masculine energy, if they are sort of overly sort of aggressive and stuff like that, again, this is all happening on a subconscious level. A lot of us aren't doing this consciously. It's not something we're doing deliberately. It's almost that polarity then comes into the workplace, but you're opposing each other, and that causes rifts. It causes rifts, and it can cause problems for leaders. So again, men and women need to know when and where to step in and step out of the different energies to try and minimize conflict at work.
And it's tricky, isn't it? It's tricky. Once you think about this, you think, okay, typically when you talk about, a board of directors that, has and in 2019, it's still predominantly male orientated.
Yeah.
And when you think about women that have trouble getting onto the board, it's almost like you need to introduce this concept to the board that's maybe already male dominated and say, look, these are the reasons why you need some male and female influence here, because you are coming at it always from this male orientated stereotypical energy, and what you're going to gain is actually you're going to gain some other energy which is good for you as a group, but also you'll get other influences which will mean that influence will be hopefully felt across the business in a bigger way, and I think
without a shadow of a doubt, it's complementary. When you get both energies in a family or in a business, then that's what it's supposed to be. It's the yin and yang, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's crucial that then when women get there, that they understand that that's the difference that they're bringing. The idea isn't that they come and bring more of the same masculine energy. The idea is that they come and they bring the feminine with them, and that's what will make the difference. Does that make sense? That's a really important point to bring across, because I think what tends to happen is women, they fight and fight and fight to get there, and then when they arrive, they stay in the masculine energy, and that isn't bringing what the full amount of difference that they can do.
No, and I understand that. In that, my partner, she's been on her own for a long time, and we've been together a few years now. And what she's actually had to have that energy, and she's got to take charge and be in that element. And what she struggles with, probably more than what I wanted to, is actually releasing it and allow me to be that. Yes. That male influence, which she hasn't really had for a long time, and it's that it feels a little bit uncomfortable, but it's something that you just got to accept, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And I expect certainly the sort of the niche that you like to operate in with family businesses as well. That brings a whole other dynamic when you're working with couples and families, and then you've got sons coming in and daughters, and you've got that whole other family dynamic mixed in with it as well. It can, and unless you have that part sussed. And do you know what, though? It's true. When I look at successful family businesses, and certainly couples who are in business together, they always have that bit nailed. They always have that bit nailed. It's really, really interesting to see.
Yeah. I want to go back to my family retail business. My mum had a clear role and my dad had a clear role, and they were very much gender specific. That's for sure. Yeah. Very much. My mum was doing the nurturing bit, and my dad was doing the sort of directing bit.
Yeah.
That's just looking back, it's quite interesting. And we're talking about stereotypical sort of roles here, but the thing is, we need a bit of that, don't we? Otherwise it gets a bit, it doesn't feel comfortable.
The problem has become that we have almost seen one as being more important than the other, which is nonsense. We've kind of looked at this masculine role because it is part of sort of being leading and deciding. I'm going to use the example of tango dancing, okay? Because it's a really good visual idea. So when you dance, or any kind of like ballroom dancing or couples dancing, it's the same. The man will lead, okay, but he can only do that if with permission, okay. So the feminine energy can always muck it up if she wanted to, or if she doesn't trust and have faith in the man, he's not going to tread on her toes and he's not going to drop her. So the masculine has to show up, and has to show up properly, and has to show up with confidence and skill and dexterity. But the feminine still has to allow it to happen. So you can ask yourself there, really, where is the power? The masculine doesn't work without permission. Otherwise it becomes toxic, and that's when it's bad, because then it becomes force, and dominance, rather than leadership with thoughtfulness and compassion. Becomes something completely different. So if the feminine allows him to do it, that's where the power really is, in my eyes. But you have that yin and yang thing, where then what you end up with is a beautiful dance and everybody wins. So rather than it being about, a constant challenge and a this one is better than that, we always talk in teams that every member of the team is just as important. The striker might stick the goal in, but on a football team, but they'll be stuffed if they don't have a goalkeeper, right? Every single team, every part of a team is just as important, and certainly if in a sort of masculine and feminine sense, both roles are absolutely imperative and need to be played kind of properly and in their fullness for it to work.
Yeah, I love that tango analogy, because I've done that, and I was thrown into a situation where I was quite new to it. I've just stepped up from basic into what they called intermediate, and I then suddenly had females that had been dancing for years, and I've been dancing for 6 months, and I had to take the lead. And some people, and it's funny, I was just thinking back now, some of them were realised that where I was and made and accommodated where I was, but others just expected me to step up. I was there. Okay, you're the man. You've got to take the lead. Doesn't matter. You've only been dancing for 6 months, and I've been dancing for 6 years. It's your decision to make. You've got to take that step and take that role. And it was tricky. So and that's a great way of framing it. And hopefully, people
notice the difference. You see, that's the supportive feminine that's going to support you and nurture you and allow you to do it at your own pace and speed and trust you to your level. The dance is always going to be better, isn't it, than the one that's kind of challenging you? Again, it depends who you are. It depends what kind of leader you are. But some people are going to react better to that, and other people are going to react better to that sort of more challenging, expecting kind of role. But either way, the women have to allow you to do it, or the feminine does, doesn't it?
Yeah. And we're naturally we're either overly supportive or overly challenging, and you could say that men are more challenging than women, but that's questionable, and obviously we're not making assumptions here. That's
the masculine and feminine is like the top line. Underneath it, again, I'm just putting together all my sort of body of work at the moment, which looks at the different archetypes that are underneath both of those. So there are different expressions of masculinity. You may have read the book King, Warrior, Lover, Wizard. So there are different ways of expressing it that kind of encompass different personality types within that, and how we lead and how we perform those kind of duties. But it doesn't detract from the masculinity of it.
No. Sadly, the time is running out, and it's been fascinating. I could talk about this so long, and I think it's some people will be listening to this, and hopefully they've see where we're coming from with this. We're not trying to put people in a box. It's about understanding that those energies are going on, and if we could use them more effectively for better outcomes, then all is good for everyone and gets to a win-win. But just to sum up then, as I always do with my guests, is how can we leave our listeners with some top tips? I normally say three top tips to take away from listening to the last 30 minutes, how they can use this information in the work environment. I guess that would be the ideal thing.
Yep. Okay. So obviously this is tricky. This is the ultimate kind of discussion that blends personal life and business life.
Yeah.
So my kind of three top tips. First of all is physical. Taking care of your body and being healthy and fit really, really encourages both masculine and feminine energy. Okay. So taking care, when your body is healthy and fit, you will resonate with your natural energy a lot better. Okay. So that's my first top tip. Do exercise and eat well, drink water. Second time is to take time out to be in your energy, to think about it, to feel what makes you feel masculine. Like we all know, we all have an innate sense of when we feel manly and when we feel feminine. So just kind of like take some time out and increase your awareness of when those times are. Really practice. And that's my third tip, is to practice. So once you know this, is to practice at home and talk about it with your partner or with the men and women in your life, in your private life, and ask them to kind of to point it out to you when you are in your masculine or feminine, and start to get an understanding of it at home first, so that you can learn how to switch in between at home, which you can then bring into the workplace and into your leadership role.
Brilliant stuff. And I think that's the important thing what you finished off there, is that, we can't really keep our home life and business work life separate, because they are interwoven, and it's actually understanding that and using this information in both contexts, which is, a win-win in both respects. Well, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure there's some great takeaways there, and some high value as always. Just what I expected from you, Fidel, and hopefully we'll get another opportunity to think or chat about another subject in the future. But for now, thank you, and I will hopefully see you again soon.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to leave a review. Don't forget to check out the Reluctant Leader project at www.thereluctantleader.co.uk. Make a note to start, stop, or continue doing whatever struck a chord in this episode. And until next time, be the best you can be.